About a year ago, I met Connor and Tez, fellow smart home enthusiasts who took it one step further. They actually started a smart home consulting company, and they spend their days designing, installing, and maintaining other people's smart homes. I've been chatting with them regularly for a while now, and I thought it would be interesting to interview these smart home experts. This isn't an ad, they haven't paid me for any of this. They're just two guys who have built dozens of smart homes for people, and I wanted to find out what tech they recommend, what automations they create, and what they've learned along the way. This video is a little different from my usual ones, and we'll be back to regular programming in the next video. But if you do find this interesting, please let me know in the comments. Let's head over to the interview. So welcome guys, thanks very much for joining me today. How about we start with some introductions? Who are you? How did you get into smart home technology? Let's start with that.
Hi, I'm Tez. My background's in theatre, so like theatre production, so lighting, sound, that type of thing, and automation.
Hi, I'm Connor. I also work in theatre alongside Tez. Again, automation, sound, lighting, everything technical, basically.
So how did you get into smart homes?
So our journey began kind of during COVID. We got a house kind of just before COVID and started putting in the odd smart product like a little Philips bulb, hive heating, that type of thing. And things kind of developed. We then got some like blinds, just loads of random bits. And then when COVID hit, kind of like we're both out of work because the theatre industry just kind of like dropped within 12 hours. And I was 2 weeks in, a couple of weeks into COVID, again just watching TV. I was like, oh, I'll just turn the lights off. That's one app. Oh, I need to close the blinds. That's another app. Just said to Connor, I was like, I'm sick of all these apps. There's just so many different apps to do so many different things. So Connor just kind of went upstairs, returned 4 hours later and was like, oh, I found this thing called Home Assistant. Everything works. And I was just like, oh, class. One app to do everything.
So what was the first version of Home Assistant that you found yourself using? When did you begin on the Home Assistant train?
Well, the first version was like a zero. It was like 0.15, so it was like a very, very early version. And at that point, it was kind of in the phase where everything was really frustrating. Everything was done through the YAML. The interface didn't really exist. Lovelace was a bit of a nightmare to get your head around. It was much more complicated. The community store didn't really have any add-ons in, so you were kind of creating a lot of it yourself from scratch. So yeah, it was a very, very early version, but it was good because it was a steep learning curve, which meant that we got to kind of wrap our heads around it very quickly. But we spent about 2 years just kind of testing it and kind of wrapping our heads around it before we actually kind of dove into it as a business. Because again, at that point as well, it was so early, such like an early version. I didn't really trust it at that point, so it was also like waiting for Home Assistant to kind of mature a bit and develop. So it was at more kind of like a stable point to actually put in other people's homes.
So you mentioned, Lovelace and the early versions of Home Assistant. Obviously, Home Assistant has come a long way in the last few years. You mentioned also, you had a lot of apps on your phone, 4 different apps to do certain things. How do you primarily interface with your home today? Do you use dashboards, voice assistants, smart switches? Like what do you think a smart home should be like?
We kind of don't have to touch the home now. That's kind of like the best way you can have it, where you actually don't have to interact with it as much as you would. Obviously, we've still got like a tablet on the wall when you first come into the hallway that's got a dashboard on where you can control everything from. But we've kind of got the home in a position now where the home kind of knows our lifestyle better than we do, if that makes any sense. We walk up the stairs, the lights come on. At sunset, the blinds will close. In the morning, at sunrise, the blinds will open. Unless we're in bed, then those ones will stay closed. Like, it's all that type of thing. So the home kind of knows our lifestyle, where we don't have to interact with it anymore. That's kind of like the best thing you can get out of it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the whole point of a smart home is if you're constantly having to open up an app to turn on your lights, or I think from like a guest point of view as well, kind of, it needs to be guest friendly. So still having kind of like your physical switches. So around our home, we still have a normal switch that'll turn on the light in every single room. So if a guest does come over, they can still use that switch in case they don't want to be shouting at Alexa. And obviously, they've not got control of the app like we do. So I think making sure that guests can still interact with it as well. So keeping those physical switches and those physical controls is super important. Don't just rely on like Alexa and apps and stuff. Make sure you've still got your bog standard switch.
What is an example of one of the coolest things that your house does automatically?
We've probably got one. We've probably got a couple each, but I'll tell you what my coolest one is in our home is just the 5 minute shower alert thing. So basically, once you've been in the shower for 5 minutes, the lights flash in the bathroom to say you've been in 5 minutes. Probably time to start wrapping this up now. And that's also great for guests as well. Like it's just to say, look, after 5 minutes, we've probably used enough hot water. Let's save the planet. Time to get out. That's my favorite one.
I think the funniest one was when that automation kicked in when we had a guest round, but they didn't know and they started to freak out very quickly because the light was just kind of strobing away at them and they had no idea why. So we had to explain that one after they got out. But I think my favorite one is probably the music one that we've got set up. So if I'm in the house on my own or if Tez is in the house on his own and we walk around, the music will actually follow us to each space in the home. So if I'm home alone and I walk downstairs into the kitchen and the music was playing in the office upstairs, it will begin to play in the kitchen. And then when I go back upstairs, it will play in the office. And it does that based on me walking around the home. So I've not got to kind of switch the source around. It will just do it based on the room that I'm in. And I quite enjoy that one because I think it's really convenient and it's probably one of the cleverest ones that we've got set up.
It's quite clever because it knows when I'm home as well. So if I'm watching TV downstairs and Connor comes downstairs for a glass of juice or something in the kitchen, the music won't follow him and it will not disrupt my program. But if I'm out the home, it will quite happily just play music in the living room or wherever he's traveling about.
So, what are you using to detect whether or not you're home?
So we're just using the mobile app. So we've got the mobile app on both of our phones, and we're just using the presence detection on that. So if we're outside of the geo fence around the home, then it knows that we're not home. But we've got a couple of kind of backup ones. So we've got like a Wi-Fi connection as well. So if we're not connected to the home Wi-Fi, then it'll do it as well. So there's a couple of different things to detect that. It's mainly like a fail-safe. So if one of them kind of gives off a false reading, it can check against another thing to kind of make sure that that's definitely the state that it's in. And that's kind of how we run a couple of different things around the home. It's kind of having more than one way to check for that result so that you kind of know that whatever you're trying to do, that's definitely the correct way to do it, if that makes sense.
I 100% agree. I remember my partner sending me a WhatsApp message saying all the lights turned off one day, and I checked the Home Assistant app, and it said that she was like 200 miles away from home. The GPS had just kind of had a bit of a wobbly at that point. So having those backup and fail safe, and if your smart home system is down, being able to just use a light switch like normal, I think that's really important. And I think a lot of those methodologies and ethos are the types of things that you would probably bring into clients' homes. I know that you guys have a smart home consulting business. How did you get into that? How did you pivot from we have a smart home to we're going to do this for a living?
Paranoia, I think. So basically, when we first started with Home Assistant, I was like, but does this work with everything? Like, so we just started buying random products, like just certain things, like, but not just expensive things, just like cheap online things as well, just to see if it would communicate with everything. And we kind of spent, like what Connor was saying earlier, like 2 years in R&D, just trying to research, just making sure it does actually work and that we could happily put it in another person's house without us being there. Because one of my things was, say if we did start this business and things go wrong and we've got like 20 plus clients, there's just the two of us. How do we go around like kind of resolving all those issues? So we wanted to make sure that it was a complete fail-safe system before putting in other people's houses. And again, COVID kind of pushed us into developing the business. We had a year and a half of pretty much time off. I know that sounds awful, but it kind of was time off and we needed to find something to do. And also, there was so much uncertainty whether the event industry was actually coming back. And luckily, we found lots of crossovers between our industry that we were previously in and the smart home industry. So the way that the automations work, creativity as well. So thinking of cool things and funky things. All of that, and that's kind of how the business developed. And then we're like, all right, yeah, we can start putting this in other people's homes. Let's create a business. And then we came up with Luxia.
So yeah, it sounds like you've tested a lot of devices. You've seen a lot of smart homes. One of the things that us YouTubers, we have one smart home, our own smart home. We don't get to see the width and the depth that you do. I'm going to ask you sort of your favorite types of technologies, your favorite brands of things, because I get asked all the time, what do you recommend for this? What do you recommend for that? So this will be a bit of a rapid fire one. So when you go into a new house and they don't have a very good internet network, or sorry, a very good Wi-Fi network, a very good home network. What do you recommend from a home networking point of view?
We would recommend Ubiquiti. So that's normally our kind of go-to. We've both got a lot of experience with it, so we kind of know it inside out. It's the network that we had set up in the theatre when we were there. So, like I said, we kind of just know how it all works, so we know that it is like solid as well. We've installed in a load of different homes now, and we've never had a problem. So, yeah, definitely Ubiquiti for that one.
And do you recommend people hardwire devices, or are you happy with Wi-Fi connections?
I'd always go with hardwired personally. Obviously, it depends on the client. So if they're going for kind of a more non-destructive approach, then you can do the wireless route. But a hardwired connection is always kind of the preferred way because then you know it's pretty much rock solid and it's not going to fail.
So I think we all know the answer to this one, but what about your favorite smart home hub to recommend? Or, I mean, it's Home Assistant, but do you recommend anything else that people have?
We have it on an Intel NUC. So we kind of, again, with all our smart home clients, we kind of try and use the same hardware for the hub, just again, because it's familiar and we know it hasn't got any issues. And also you can kind of just customize the NUC based on basically how busy you think the home's going to be. So based on RAM and processing and stuff like that, we can kind of just customize that the way that we want it to be.
And I used to use a NUC as well. I absolutely love that hardware. I used to run my Home Assistant on Docker within the NUC. Do you guys run a bit of virtualization or anything like containerization?
No, we haven't got any of that set up, mainly to kind of minimize the amount of things that can go wrong. Because obviously in our situation, you've kind of got to get out of that mentality of thinking, well, this is how I would do it. Because in our situation, it's not about us, it's about other people. And it's about making sure that what we're putting in their home is going to work for years to come. And when we don't want to be spending constant time troubleshooting things, obviously the client doesn't want us to be there all the time troubleshooting things and like, oh, my lights don't work because this has failed or whatever. So from our point of view, we have to try and set it up in the simplest way possible, so it's easy to maintain and it's less likely to fail. I think that's where kind of most people go wrong when they think of Home Assistant as a business, is they think of it as, well, that's how I would do it, when it should be a more generalized, how would you do it for thousands of people?
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for the keep it simple, stupid methodology. So you're running the Home Assistant operating system directly on the NUC. I assume everything else then is sort of run as add-ons and using that system then.
Yeah, so we've got add-ons, and we also use the Home Assistant community store, so hacks. We try to use it as little as possible. Again, just kind of trying to keep it simple and trying to keep kind of the amount of third-party things to like a minimum. But we do have a couple of add-ons, mainly for the dashboards and stuff.
What about smart home protocol wise? Do you use anything specific, or you rely on Wi-Fi devices?
We try to kind of use the same protocol throughout the home. So mostly Zigbee, to be honest. We found it's pretty solid. We tried Z-Wave ones, but we're quite limited in products at the time. So again, Zigbee, it's just great and it just works. And most of the most premium manufacturers also use that as well. So things like Philips Hue, that's their protocol. You can seamlessly integrate it with Home Assistant, no problem, without the Philips Hue hub as well, which is class.
So what are your thoughts on Matter or Thread? It's all in the news, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it's obviously trying to unify kind of everything into one protocol and stuff, but I suppose that's what all of them have tried to do in the past, in a way. It just feels like it's going to be another kind of protocol that exists alongside all of the current ones. Obviously, at the moment, it's still extremely new, and there's still kind of not everyone's integrated it yet. So it's still kind of in its early stages, I think, but hopefully it does do what it's set out to achieve and kind of unifies the whole smart home market. But a little bit of me does think it's just going to end up being another protocol alongside your Wi-Fi and your Zigbee and all of that. But hopefully it can do what it's set out to do and make the smart home world a better place by just having the one protocol.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, I'm rooting for it. I hope it plays out. But as I keep telling people, just because Matter devices land on the market or Thread becomes more popular doesn't stop your Zigbee or Z-Wave devices from working. They will still work perfectly well locally until they eventually give up. So there's no reason to switch to one or the other. You can run them side by side.
Yeah.
So obviously using Zigbee on Home Assistant, are you using the ZHA, the Zigbee Home Automation version, or Zigbee to MQTT?
So we run Zigbee to MQTT, but we have, again, when we were kind of testing things and developing the way that we would do stuff, we tested all of them. So we did like Zigbee Home Assistant, and we did Decons as well. That was another one that we went through at one point. The dongles as well, we've tested them all. We've tested like the Combi 2, and the one that we're sticking at the minute is the Sonoff dongle, and it's the Sonoff P that we've got. But yeah, so we've tested all of those, and again, we ended up with Zigbee to MQTT just because we found it really easy to use. The user interface, in my opinion, is dead friendly. There's a lot of features as well. So you've got the over-the-air updates that you can do for firmwares on devices. I know that's available in the other ones as well. But again, personally, just I preferred Zigbee to MQTT after testing them all.
So you mentioned over-the-air updates and firmware updates. How do you handle updates with your clients? Do you just log in remotely and hope that it works, or do you have a more robust system in place for that?
Yeah, we try and do like a yearly service. Well, we do a yearly service for all of our clients, and we kind of hold back the updates until then. So we're kind of there in person before we update it, because the last thing that we want is to do it remotely and then nothing works, but we're not physically there. Or we might end up kind of locking ourselves out of it remotely if an update's kind of that destructive. So we try and do it in person. Well, we do do it in person every time. We kind of, even if it's like, if the service is due in about 3 months, we'll kind of just hold back and just do them all at that time.
Yeah, I think that thing of like, obviously we can do remote updates, and that's like perfectly possible, but it's that kind of little thing in the back of your mind that says, well, if this goes wrong and they're like a 2-hour drive away, they're not going to have their home for like 2 hours at the very least. It might take us like 2 days before we can get out there and fix it. So yeah, although we can do updates remotely, definitely on site 100% of the time.
Yeah, I was a systems engineer in a past life, and I've bricked many a server remotely doing updates, firmware updates, usually at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's when the client wanted us to do the work, and having to go to a data center, badge in, reset a box. Those are days are now behind me, thankfully. Yeah, so you use Zigbee. I assume you're using a lot of the Zigbee devices then. What do you recommend in terms of smart bulbs? For example, you mentioned you started with those.
Yeah, Philips Hue, like, are kind of our go-to if you want like color change and anything like that. They're just solid and they just work every time. We say that quite often, touch wood, like it just works every time, which is great. What we've kind of tried to do, it can be quite costly though, if you've got like a whole home that you want to like transform smart. We've tried to just use smart switches instead of smart bulbs, so they can utilize their previous fixtures or the previous fittings. They might have what we've come across like is a really old-fashioned fitting, where they're like, oh, I really like this chandelier, but I want to make it smart. So like, oh, okay, well, what we can do is it dimmable? Yeah, it is dimmable. It's still using halogen bulbs, some of them. We can put in a smart switch instead of just changing every bulb. So again, that's just like a little cost saving for the client, and they can still utilize their old fixtures, which is quite cool.
What smart switches do you generally recommend for your clients? I also use smart switches. I think we've got hundreds of bulbs in our ceilings, the GU10s, and replacing those would have been an absolute nightmare in terms of cost. So what smart switches did you end up choosing?
Again, we've been through like all of them. We've done the Philips Hue, we've done Aqara, we've done Sonoff, we've done like other brands. There's like a Friends of Hue brand as well. So yeah, we've tested them all, but the ones that I quite like are the Aqara ones, because you can put them in the detached mode, so they can still be connected to the wiring, so they can control like a regular bulb. But then if you put smart bulb in, you can run it in detached mode, so it can do like a wireless command instead of breaking the circuit to the bulb as well. So I quite like that feature. But the ones that we've actually got in our own home are the Friends of Hue ones, which are kinetic, so they don't need batteries in, so they just charge up themselves when you press the switch. Now, that is a wireless approach for us, because we made the mistake of putting smart bulbs in. But I say mistake, it's just I would do it differently now. But when you've spent like £60 a bulb or whatever stupid price it was at the time, you don't really want to go back on that. So we're kind of getting the most out of our bulbs for now. But to anyone watching, I would say go with a switch. Okay, that is definitely the way to go. Get a switch, get a relay. And yeah, but probably the Akara ones would be the ones to go for.
And you mentioned relays as well. What relays would you recommend for your clients?
The Sonoff Minis, they're quite cool. Again, they're petite, so you can hide them easily, whether it's behind light switches or behind ceiling roses, depending on what your wiring's like. You can also get them without a neutral, which is really handy for old wiring. So if your neutral isn't wired to the switch, you can still put it behind the switch, which is really good. And again, they just work. Like they do work. They pair, no problem. You can hide them out the way and just forget about them, which is great.
What about light strips? Do you recommend the Hue LED strips as well?
So I'd probably go with just a generic strip, mainly because the price point on the Hue is like outrageous. So if you just get a standard strip and then you can connect it to an LED driver, like a smart driver, and if you're going to go that route, I would advise that you get an RGB cold white and warm white one. So you can get like RGB, you can get like an RGB white where it's only got like one certain white chip in. But if you get one with all of the colors in, you'll get a more accurate white color. If you try to create white from just RGB, it will look like horrible. It just won't look very nice. So make sure that you get the independent white chips. And then, let's say, get a driver to match that strip, and it'll be significantly cheaper. And that is the route that we always tend to go down as well.
With LED strip, it kind of depends on the application as to what type of strip you want to get as well. So if you want something that's just kind of for atmosphere, if it's maybe like under cabinet lighting where it's again RGB would kind of do without white, you just want kind of funky colors, that's great. But you can also get, we had a client a couple of months ago who wanted basically his whole kitchen to be LED strip, so no fixtures at all. So we came across the seamless cob strip, which is basically there's just no gaps like between the LEDs at all. It's just a full cob, and that's RGB WW, and it needed to be like that because again, for cooking, for cleaning, from like a safety aspect as well, you need to have proper light, if that makes sense. But like what Connor said previously, we can still just attach the same Zigbee interface to it to talk to it, which is good.
So you mentioned about music following you around the home. What are you using for smart home audio? Using Sonos or anything else like that?
So all we've got set up in our home, it's very very basic, and not what you'd have probably expected from two sound engineers is Alexas. We were actually just talking about this the other day. So we want to go down the Sonos route and actually get some like proper like ceiling speakers installed with amps that actually sound good. But obviously they're very very expensive. So at the moment, what we've just got is like Alexas in each room, which we use for audio. But the Sonos route is what we'll be going down shortly.
I wasn't expecting that
Yeah,
answer at all.
it was
I
funny.
thought you'd
It
have
was
some
literally
like,
just yes. So we were fitting a Lift Audio ceiling speaker in a magician's shop, right? Let's just live that the other day, and I got home and I just put some music on. I was like, Connor, we're both sound engineers, and we're listening to music through Alexa. It just doesn't make any sense, like what we're doing here. It's just something that we haven't really sorted. It's one of those things that we just haven't sorted yet.
I think if you go to any plumber's house, you'll find that their toilet doesn't work. You do it for a living. You don't want to bring it home with you each time either.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned, the house follows you around and such. So you obviously have some sort of sensors in there. What do you guys recommend for motion sensors?
So we use the MM Wave sensors, and we're using I think they're from Moores, the ones that we've got. They're like a ceiling mount, like a flush ceiling mount one. So you obviously got to put a pole in the ceiling, and it kind of just fits in, and then it'll get the whole room. And I think it's a 9 meter detection radius, so it can it can get like extremely large rooms as well. But we use those instead of PIR. because with PIR you get false detections. Obviously, it uses infrared, so they're affected by heat, like smoke, steam, all of those kinds of things can kind of give off a false trigger, or they could stop the sensor from triggering if it's too hot in a certain room. Not that that might be a thing that you'll encounter, but just it can happen. So we found more reliable detection with the wave sensors, and like I said, it's got like a 9 meter detection radius, so they can do entire rooms all on their own.
And are they hardwired into the mains electricity, or are they battery powered?
So they're hardwired. The ones that we've got, I think all wave ones are, just because of how powerful they are. So you can get like wall mounted ones as well. There's a couple of different options, but we went for the ceiling mount ones just because they're flush and they're kind of out the way, and it's also easy to get the cable into them when they're just up in like the loft and stuff. So yeah.
And do you find that the wave sensors trigger fast enough for lights to be turned on as you come into the room with that magical effect?
Yeah, they're great. Like we did a comparison, which this is going to sound ridiculous, where we kind of like had a Philips PIR and the Moores side by side, and we're kind of like just trying to stay still for like a little bit. And the Moores one, we just knew we were there constantly. It just works. Like what Connor was saying, like you can change the radius on it to look up to 9 meters, but if you've got like a high ceiling, you can kind of bring that radius in as well, so it's still detecting the whole room without with that same sensitivity as it would with a more shallow ceiling.
Yeah, but it like responds instantly as well. And there's one in the office that I'm in now, and this light hasn't gone off all day. And literally, as soon as you like open the door to go in, the light just comes on straight away. It's like it knows as soon as you touch the handle that you're going into that room. So yeah, they're definitely very impressive.
Yeah, I'm the same. I've switched out a lot of my PIR sensors for millimeter wave, especially where I'm sitting down, like at the office or on the sofa, where I'm not generally moving that much. They do a great job of keeping the lights on, but I haven't yet switched them to turning on the lights. I still have PIRs for that, but I'll have to give it another go. What other kind of sensors do you have in people's houses? Do you have temperature sensors, contact sensors, and if so, what brands do you recommend?
Contact sensors are great for like loft hatches and stuff like that. So if you just want to kind of turn on the light when you open the hatch, it's a Cara that we used. For, yeah, a
Yeah.
Cara. They're great, and they're just again because of the size of them, they're so petite, and the batteries last about 2 years before you have to do a change, which is great. So you can kind of just put them anywhere and hide them out of the way.
Yeah, we've also got humidity sensors in some bathrooms. This one isn't as common in client homes, but we have got a couple set up. So when they're in the shower, the sensor knows that they're in the shower, and it won't turn off the light on them. Because I think a couple of them, when we started with the PIRs, again going back to that kind of heat and the steam thing, when we had those in some clients' homes, they'd get in the shower. Obviously, the room might fill up with steam, and then the sensor doesn't work anymore, or it's not as accurate. So by pairing it with a humidity sensor, we were able to kind of increase the reliability of that by letting it know that the shower is on, so that there's probably somebody in that room still.
Yeah, and we also link that same humidity sensor to the extraction fan as well. So the extraction fan will stay on whilst it's humid, and then once it's cleared, it'll kind of cut off and switch off from there. So it's not just running all of the time.
And that way it doesn't come on in the middle of the night when you go to the bathroom and it doesn't keep you awake.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
And are you using these humidity sensors for the basis of your 5 minute shower timer as well?
They're not a part of that. No, no. So the one that we've got set up, we've got a smart plug set up to that. So the shower pump is actually into a smart plug, and then that monitors the power consumption. So when it goes above a certain uh, wattage, it knows that the pump's on, and then it'll kind of flash the bulbs after 5 minutes.
We haven't been cruel enough to just turn off the pump after 5 minutes
Yeah.
yet. We haven't done that. We haven't done that.
That's after 10
Yeah,
minutes.
that's 10 minutes.
So what about smart blinds? What do you recommend for those?
Somfy are kind of like the way to go, purely based on a bit of R&D of speed more than anything. They're just so quick, and they can be battery powered as well as hardwired, which is great for certain clients. If they want it to be non-destructive, we can just stick a battery one up. If they're kind of still within their new build situation, which is the ideal, we can run cabling in and stuff to every window, which is great. But they're just so quick. They can do like a 2 meter run in like 12 seconds or something like that. They're super, super fast and quite quiet, which is nice.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing is the volume, because so many of the ones that we've tested in the past just have really loud motors in them. And when you've got a whole house full of them, say you've got 6 motors and they're all like, the sunsets or whatever, and they all kick in at the same time, it sounds like you're in like some big like industrial factory with all these motors like cranking away. So I think making sure that they're like whisper quiet is super important.
I really wish I had have met you guys before I started building my smart home. My battery powered blinds are probably my least favorite, just because they end up going flat at the most inappropriate times and they're half up and you have to go and pull out a giant USB cable to plug it in. So yeah, I strongly recommend people hardwire where they can in that situation as well. Speaking of hardwiring things, what about security cameras, CCTV cameras? Do you have any recommendations there? And do you recommend Wi-Fi or Ethernet there?
Definitely Ethernet again. Just make sure it's hardwired, especially when it comes to security. In fact, when it comes to kind of cameras and stuff, I would say that's the only option. Wi-Fi, I wouldn't trust it when it comes to cameras, just because it does fail. We've got a doorbell that runs on Wi-Fi and it's constantly failing. So when it comes to cameras, I would definitely always hardwire them. We Depending on what it is, we might do Hikvision. We can install Hikvision. That's sometimes our go-to. If it's a standalone camera install, that's probably what we would go to. But for Home Assistant, I think Reolink is going to be your best option just because it's feature rich. So when you integrate with Reolink, you can get pretty much access to every single setting on the camera from Home Assistant. So if it's like a pan tilt zoom camera, you can access all of that from Home Assistant. So you can actually control the camera from within Home Assistant. And obviously the whole point of Home Assistant is to try and get rid of other apps as well in some respect. So I think having kind of the more control you can have through Home Assistant, the better. So then you're not having to swap to your other apps to kind of get that control.
Do you find that the performance of the stream through Home Assistant, like with my cameras, I find that if I open up Home Assistant, it's often quite like slow or jerky or delayed. How do these cameras work that way, or do you have a solution to those?
I think it depends on the camera as well. So we've noticed that with certain cameras. I think the one that we use Unify as well. So that's the doorbell that we've got. But we got the Unify doorbell before they brought out the PoE one, which is a little bit annoying, but that'll be a future swap, I'm sure. But the Unify one is like crystal clear. It runs the live feed perfectly as well. It doesn't like lag. But the Hikvision ones take a while to connect to the stream. And even when it has connected, it might only last maybe a minute or so, and then it kind of times out. So I think it just depends on the camera that you've got, and also the way that you've integrated the camera as well. Obviously, impacts the way that the stream runs.
So with these cameras, how do you record the footage? Do you record it to the cloud or locally? Do you have specific hardware for that or software that you recommend?
The Hikvision stuff would just take it straight to its NVR, so it's still got like an external storage, which is great, and it's not in the cloud; it's still in the client's home, so they can access it any time, and they kind of know it's safe and it's theirs. That's what we found as well. One of the questions from many clients is like, "When it's in the cloud, who else can see it? Like, where's it at?" And it's like, well, we try and keep everything local, as much as we possibly can.
I think that's one of the draw cards of Home Assistant as well. Everything local, and they try and promote local integrations and local devices. And I'm 100% on board with that as well. I want my home to keep working when the company goes out of business or my internet's down, or as often I just want to keep everything local. What about thermostats or heating and cooling systems in people's houses?
So we used to go with Hive. That was kind of the route that we started down. But we had some troubles with Hive support at one point. A couple of their TRVs, the thermostatic radiator valves, we had some problems with those. and we just found that the support that we got wasn't really up to standard, and we didn't find it very helpful. That might just be our personal experience, nothing against Hive, but in our experience, it wasn't very good. And when you're installing this into the people's homes, you need that support from that company that you're installing from. And if you haven't got their support, if they've kind of not got your back with things, then we're not going to go with you. So we kind of steered away from Hive because of that, and also the cloud connection as well. Hive relies on the cloud, and that was a negative to us as well. So again, we've just kind of stepped away from there, and we've gone to Wiser instead. So that's kind of where we're heading towards now. And again, there's more features available from the integration. So we get more control through the Home Assistant app, and the reliability as well we found is better. And we also get that support that we kind of didn't get before. So yeah, we're kind of go with Wiser now.
So I was wondering if there's any other sort of devices that you guys come across. I kind of bias towards my house. I don't have a garage, for example. So do you recommend anything else we should? Because I know a lot of people ask me about garage door openers or irrigation systems. Have you got any sort of main thoughts about that?
Little Shelly relays are really handy for garage doors. I know they work over Wi-Fi, but as long as you've got a good connection, like they're sweet. One of our previous clients who we originally went for was just for smart lighting and smart heating. They had just moved in. There was like an old Siemens lighting system in there. It was about 18 years old. Basically, this guy had just moved in and he was trying to turn on his ensuite, but downstairs living room was coming on. Like random switches were doing random rooms. So we kind of went in, ripped all that out, started getting put a Philips Hue system in. He kind of like got the taste for it. So we give him the app. He had, it's all done through the hub and stuff. And then a few months later, he was like, "Oh, I keep leaving the garage door open. Can you just come have a look at the garage door?" And we're like, "Is it motorized?" He was like, "Yep." We're like, "Great. We can just put a relay in of some sort." So we put a little Shelly relay in, and a little like a contact sensor, so it knows when it was open and closed. And after 10 minutes of the garage being open, it kind of sends him a little alert saying, "Do you know you've left the garage door open? Do you want to close it?" And he can close it straight from his phone. So they're pretty cool. And again, they're really small. You can hide them. That's kind of our thing as well. We kind of want to keep stuff out of the way where people, one, can't see it, but also can't get their hands on it as much as well. If they just fancy just having a little, "Oh, how have they done that?" It's kind of, no, let's just hide it out the way just in case you do disrupt something or whatever.
It sounds like every smart home journey I've heard of, you start with one thing and you go, "Oh, maybe I could automate this too, or maybe I could automate that." So when you first meet a new potential client, how do you begin the process? How does it work with your company?
Literally sit down, have a cup of tea with them for like an hour. When we first started, we knew what we were doing, but we didn't really know what questions to ask. And we kind of got back to the office and we're like, "Oh, we should have checked the internet connection. We should have checked this. We should have checked that." So now we've kind of got this like go-to check sheet, which has kind of got everything on that we kind of need to ask them. One of the big things is trying to find out their lifestyle because everybody's different. And what's great about meeting different clients is they've all got different ideas. So it's like, "Oh, I've never thought about that." Well, yeah, we can do that. We'll have a go at doing that. Again, another client, their daughter would never come down for tea when they were trying to like shout her down for tea. He was like, "Oh, if I just had like a call Antonia button," we're like, "Oh, we can do that. Your light switch can be that." And he was like, "What?" It's like, you can just hold press your light switch, it'll flash a light and it'll announce, "Antonia, your tea's ready," and it'll keep doing that until you press it again when she comes down. "Oh, cool. Yeah, we can have that." So there's things like that. But yeah, it's basically just sitting down with them, trying to find out exactly what they want, what they've already got as well. So is there already things that we can integrate that already exist in the home? But that check sheet is like a lifesaver.
That's the one, yeah. We've like developed that over like a couple of years now, and we just keep like adding more and more to it as well. But it'll check like everything. Like, do they want relays? What kind of relay? Is it dimmable? Does it need to be RGB? Does it need to have a warm and cool white chip? Have they got bayonet bulbs? Have they got Edison style bulbs? Have they like the heating? Is it a multi-zone system? Is there underfloor heating? It literally goes through and ticks off everything that you would have to know. So it covers kind of all bases, and then from there we can literally go away and just craft a quote based on that sheet that we've got. So yeah, it's like super handy.
That's the thing that will constantly evolve as you meet new and new clients. And I love the different ideas that people bring. This is exactly why I wanted you guys on the channel, because I have my ideas, but bringing that sort of wealth of information of call someone for dinner. I never even thought of that. So okay, I've engaged you guys. We've done the questionnaire. How does the install work? What happens after I say yes? Let's go ahead.
So yeah, so we'll kind of order the product. Once the product arrive at your home, and kind of just crack on and install it. Depend on the size and the scale of it. Depends on how many people we bring with us as well. So if we bring like a couple of electricians or we're bringing plumbers, depending if there's heating bits. If it's a new build, that's great. Can we get in there for the first fix? Can we get all the cabling in before you've started plastering and all of that jazz? So it's kind of trying to work out with the client what their schedule is, and also what their availability is like. Are they happy with us to just crack on when they're not on site, or do they need to be around? Do we need to work kind of around their working hours sometimes? So we kind of work on a Sunday, which is fine because most people are off on Sunday. We can just sit, have a cup of tea with them, and kind of install, and also show them the app without any time pressure as well to go, right, look at, we'll go through every single automation that we've set up. We'll go through the bits that are user definable, so the bits in the app that you can change. Do you like how it looks? Do you know, all that type of thing? But it's basically, once the product's arrived, get in the home and kind of crack on, get it all installed.
Yeah, I think the beauty of it is as well, once the hardware's in, once we've kind of got that hub set up and we've got all of the kind of physical devices put in, we can then go away and we can program the home from like the office as well. So we don't need to be on site to kind of do all of the automations, which is like super handy. So we're not constantly kind of in the client's way. So as soon as the install's done and we've got all the hardware in, we can actually come off site and then do all of the programming remotely as well, which is, like I said, super handy.
So you mentioned you try and keep things out of their way so they don't mess with it. Home Assistant isn't known for being the most user friendly. It's quite technical, quite complicated. How do you make it accessible to your average home user?
A lot of dashboard versions that we've gone through. I've kind of lost count of how many dashboards we've created now. But the one that we've got at the minute, we've had for just over a year now, and that's kind of what we've settled on. And with on our dashboard, we've kind of brought things out that normally live within the Home Assistant menus, and we've brought it onto that dashboard so they can control certain elements directly from the dashboard without having to go into the kind of internal settings. So they can like enable and disable automations. They can even like change automations. They can create scenes and stuff from the dashboard without having to go into the menu of Home Assistant. And I think that's kind of the key to it. So we can then simplify it all for them as well. Because the actual Home Assistant menus themselves might be a bit complicated to someone who's not used them before, whereas we can kind of simplify that so it's more straightforward and we can get rid of the features that they might not use or that might be a bit more technical. And then anything beyond that, that's when we would step in and kind of program that for them. But I think kind of tailoring the dashboard from our end to make it as user friendly as possible so they can actually access the Home Assistant features without really going into the menus too much.
You've got a new house, you've got the dashboard set up. What are like the standard automations that you put into almost every home?
Lighting. So lighting's kind of like a big thing for everyone because it's practical but also quite cool.
I think smart lighting is the one that's like the one that people always go to. It's the first one that we get kind of inquiries about. And when you go into a room and the lights turn on, and you come out of that room and they turn off, I think people find that really cool, especially someone who's just getting into smart homes. It's quite like Tony Stark kind of futuristic, and I think it just gets people excited. But then also lighting automations based on like sunset and sunrise. So when the sun sets, a lamp comes on and stuff like that. Lighting automation that we've just done in our own home recently that I thought was quite cool. It's dead basic, but like I think it's cool still. When you come out onto the landing at night, the fixture that we've got isn't dimmable. So it's like a big LED light and that kind of just comes on at like full brightness. But if you're getting up in the middle of the night to go downstairs and get a drink, it's quite kind of in your face. So we came up with an automation where when you come onto the landing after a certain time, instead of turning on the main light on the landing, it actually turns on the living room lamp, which is downstairs, which is still bright enough to illuminate the stairs, but that's a dimmable bulb. So we can actually dim that fixture. So it's still bright enough to see the stairs and it's still safe, but we're not turning on that big LED light, which is like blinding at 3 a.m. So I thought that was quite a cool one to do, which is it's one that Tez thought of, and I was like, that's really clever, like as well.
Yeah, it's super simple. Some of the other ones, like thermostats, are a thing. So if you're in a room and you open a window and you've got the heating on, the thermostat will close and the thermostat valve will close in that room, so you're not wasting energy. That's the one that's pretty cool. The garage doors, they're like a big thing for people again, just because it's something that people forget to close. I don't know why, but that's just something that people, they just kind of forget to close their garage doors, so to get an alert. Like one of our ones, which we use every week, in fact, is just a reminder for which bin to put out. Like there's little things like that, like is it recycling this week, is it general waste, or what is it, the garden bin? And that just kind of reminds us on the night before at 7 p.m. just to say, oh, the recycling bin needs to go out. But that's just a handy one for everyone.
I saw a really great video somewhere, I can't remember where it was exactly, and it had an LED strip that changed color above the bin. So know, like the green bin goes out today, the yellow bin or the red bin, and it actually alerted all the neighbors on the street to that bin as well. So they would look at this person's house and go, ah, it's the red bin today. So I 100% agree with that. So obviously a wealth of experience, a lot of houses that you've helped set up. If someone is watching today and they want to start a new smart home, what would be, your advice for someone who's looking to start today? Where should they start? What should they think of? What would be your suggestion to them?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is just research first. I think a lot of people kind of dive into it head first and they go, oh, well, I'm going to buy some bulbs and I'm going to buy some switches and I'm going to buy this. And they don't kind of plan things out. So I think before you start anything, kind of just sit down and have a proper think about what it is that you want to achieve and then go away and try and find the best way of achieving that. I've said previously we made kind of the mistake of buying bulbs first, whereas now if I'd have done more of research, I'd have bought switches first instead. So I think kind of that mentality of just going away and like planning things, and when you do begin, like document it all. So like make a note of everything that you're doing. If you're changing switches around, if you're changing the wiring, if you've got electricians in doing switches and like changing stuff, just document all of it so that when you move house, you can either pass that documentation on to the new owner if you're selling it as a smart home, or if you need to change it back, if you're taking devices with you, you know exactly what to change. Because when you put in relays behind walls and in ceilings and stuff, you're going to forget about them. If you've done it like 2 years ago, you're going to forget that that's there. Whereas if it's documented, you can go, oh yeah, I forgot that I put that in, but now I can take that out before I move, or I can let the new owner know that that's there. So basically, research things, plan things, and document stuff. We've actually got like a little PDF that we wrote a little while ago, which is like 5 essential steps to creating a smart home. And that goes through everything that you need to do to be able to set up a smart home. Again, talks about planning and documenting things. Talks about kind of the approach to products and how to price stuff. So if, again, you're doing smart lighting, if you've got a room that's maybe got 6 GU10s in, instead of replacing those 6 bulbs, which is going to be quite costly, just replace the switch. So instead of it costing maybe, I don't know, like £40 a bulb, it's now just £40 for the switch instead. So kind of that approach as well. But yeah, so there's just 5 essential steps in there that just tells you exactly how to build your smart home the best way possible.
That sounds really great. Would it be okay if I link to that in the description below for the viewers?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll get that sent over.
So thanks very much for taking the time to chat with me. I think that I've learned a lot talking to you guys, and hopefully everyone watching has learned a lot as well. Want to say thanks for coming, and yeah, have a great day.
Yeah, no, thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks for having us.
So what did you all think? Did you find this video interesting and informative? Do you want to see more from Connor and Tez? Should we start a home automation podcast? Let me know in the comments below. And whilst you're down there, why not hit the subscribe button so that you know when I release new videos, and then together we can make your home smarter.